When the United States government announced its plan to censor music in October 1987, nobody expected the two biggest rivals in entertainment to do what they did next. What Michael Jackson and Prince accomplished together in just 3 weeks would not only save the future of music, but create one of the most powerful moments in entertainment history. Before we dive into this incredible true story, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to witness proves that sometimes the greatest enemies make the most unstoppable allies. This isn't just about a concert. This is about the night when the King of Pop and the Purple One put aside years of bitter rivalry to fight for something bigger than both of them, the soul of music itself. It was October 15th, 1987, when Senator Albert Gore Jr. announced the most aggressive music censorship legislation in American history. The Cultural Decency Act would give the federal government unprecedented power to ban songs, fine artists, and even shut down record labels for producing what politicians deemed morally corrupting content. The announcement sent shockwaves through the music industry. Under the proposed law, entire genres could be eliminated overnight. Hip-hop artists faced criminal charges for their lyrics. Rock bands could be banned from performing. Even pop stars weren't safe if their music was deemed sexually suggestive or promoting dangerous behavior. The legislation had powerful backing from conservative religious groups and worried parents across America, making it likely to pass Congress within months. The roots of this censorship movement stretch back to 1985, when Tipper Gore, wife of Senator Al Gore, had formed the Parents Music Resource Center after her daughter accidentally heard Prince's Darling Nikki, with its explicit sexual references. What began as a concerned parents' crusade had evolved into a full-scale political movement with significant financial backing from evangelical organizations and conservative political action committees. The PMRC had successfully pressured record companies to add parental advisory labels, but that was just the beginning of their agenda. Behind closed doors, PMRC leaders had developed a comprehensive strategy to reshape American popular culture. Internal documents, later leaked to Rolling Stone magazine, revealed plans to eliminate not just explicit content, but any music that challenged traditional social values. Their definition of dangerous content included songs about divorce, questioning authority, promoting racial equality too aggressively, or even expressing female empowerment in ways they deemed inappropriate. The Cultural Decency Act was designed to give legal force to their moral crusade. Michael Jackson was in his private studio at Neverland Ranch when his manager, Frank DeLeo, burst in with the devastating news. Michael had been working on arrangements for his upcoming Bad World Tour, perfecting every detail of songs that had taken him years to create. The irony wasn't lost on him that while he obsessed over artistic perfection, politicians in Washington were preparing to destroy that very art. "They're targeting Dirty Diana," Frank said, his voice heavy with concern. "The song's on their explicit list. If this law passes, radio stations won't be able to play it, MTV won't air the video, and record stores could be fined for selling the album." Michael sat in stunned silence as Frank continued reading from the proposed legislation. Songs that depicted violence, sexual themes, drug use, or antisocial behavior would be subject to federal review and potential banning. "This can't be happening," Michael whispered, thinking about all the artists who had influenced him, from James Brown's raw energy to Diana Ross's sensual performances. "They're trying to control our voices, our creativity, our connection with people." What made it even more painful was that Michael had spent his entire career walking a careful line, trying to be provocative enough to be interesting but mainstream enough to reach everyone. Now even his most carefully crafted songs were under attack. What Michael didn't know was that across the country in his Purple Rain recording studio in Minneapolis, Prince was having an almost identical conversation with his manager, Alan Leeds. Prince had always been more rebellious than Michael, more willing to push boundaries and challenge social norms through his music. If the government was targeting mainstream artists like Michael Jackson, Prince knew his entire catalog was doomed. "Your whole career is at risk," Alan told Prince bluntly. "Songs of the Times, Darling Nikki, Sexy MF, I Want to Be Your Lover. They're all on the federal review list. If this becomes law, you might not be able to perform half your songs." Prince, who had always been fiercely protective of his artistic independence, felt something he'd never experienced before: genuine fear for the future of music. The scope of the proposed censorship was staggering. A leaked copy of the Federal Music Review Guidelines showed that government censors would evaluate songs based on 37 different criteria, including sexual content, violence, drug references, anti-authoritarian themes, occult imagery, and even excessive individualism. The guidelines were so broad that virtually any song could be banned if a government reviewer decided it violated community standards. The irony wasn't lost on either artist. Michael Jackson and Prince had been locked in the most famous rivalry in music history for nearly a decade. Ever since Prince had refused to participate in We Are the World and made pointed comments about Michael's appearance and commercial appeal, their relationship had been defined by competition, jealousy, and barely concealed animosity. Music magazines constantly pitted them against each other, creating artificial battles for supremacy. Fans chose sides. Award shows became battlegrounds where every victory for one felt like a defeat for the other. Their rivalry had become so intense that they actively avoided being in the same places at the same time. When both were invited to the same industry events, elaborate protocols were developed to ensure they wouldn't have to interact. Their respective teams had standing orders never to book studio time at facilities where the other might be recording. The competition had become personal, professional, and seemingly permanent. But now, facing the greatest threat to artistic freedom in American history, their rivalry seemed suddenly meaningless. The government wasn't distinguishing between the king of pop and the purple one. They were coming for both of them. Politicians didn't care about chart positions or Grammy wins or who sold more albums. They saw two artists challenging social norms through their music, and they wanted both of them silenced. For 3 days, both artists struggled with the same question: how do you fight the federal government? The answer came from an unexpected source who had watched their rivalry with growing frustration for years. October 18, 1987. Quincy Jones was in his Beverly Hills office reviewing the latest industry reports about the proposed censorship law when he made a decision that would change music history. As a producer who had worked with both artists and understood their personalities, Quincy realized that this crisis presented an opportunity that might never come again. If Michael Jackson and Prince could put aside their differences and unite against this common threat, they could create a movement powerful enough to stop the legislation. But it would require both men to swallow their pride and admit they needed each other. First, he called Michael. "Listen, baby," Quincy said in his distinctive voice, "I've been thinking about this censorship situation. You know who else they're targeting? Prince. And you know what? This is bigger than any rivalry. This is about the survival of music itself." Michael listened quietly as Quincy continued. "You two have been so busy competing against each other that you've forgotten you're fighting for the same thing: the right to make music that moves people." An hour later, Quincy made an almost identical call to Prince. "Your purple badness," he said with characteristic directness. "The government doesn't care about your beef with Michael Jackson. They want to silence both of you. Maybe it's time to think about what's more important, your ego or your art." Prince's initial response was skeptical, but Quincy pressed on. "You know what would really shake up the establishment? If you and Michael showed them what happens when artists stop fighting each other and start fighting together." Both conversations ended the same way, with Quincy suggesting something that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. "What if you two put aside your differences and showed the world what happens when artists unite? What if you proved that music is stronger than politics?" The idea was audacious, unprecedented, and potentially catastrophic. Michael Jackson and Prince performing together? Their combined egos alone could sink the project. But as news of the censorship law spread, something unexpected began happening across the country. Radio DJs started playing banned songs in protest, announcing that they would continue playing the music until their licenses were revoked. MTV ran a marathon of controversial videos, with VJs explaining the historical importance of artistic freedom. Record stores displayed the targeted albums prominently in their windows, with signs reading, "Buy them before they're banned." The public was fighting back spontaneously, but they needed leadership. They needed their biggest stars to show them how to resist effectively. They needed someone with the platform and credibility to organize a response that politicians couldn't ignore. October 21st, 1987. The phone call that changed everything happened at exactly 3:17 p.m. Michael, encouraged by Quincy's words and his own growing conviction that this fight was bigger than personal rivalries, picked up his private line and dialed a number he'd never called before. Prince's direct studio line. "It's Michael," he said when Prince answered, his voice uncertain but determined. There was a long pause as both men processed the magnitude of this moment. Years of rivalry, competition, and mutual antagonism hung in the silence between them. "I know we've had our differences," Michael continued, "but right now they're trying to destroy everything we've worked for, everything music means to people. I think we need to talk." Prince's response surprised both of them. "I've been thinking the same thing," he admitted, his voice softer than Michael had ever heard it. "This isn't about us anymore. This is about every kid who finds themselves in a song, every person who uses music to heal, every artist who's trying to tell their truth. When can you be here?" 2 hours later, Michael Jackson's private jet touched down in Minneapolis. The sight of Michael's distinctive red leather jacket walking through Prince's Purple Rain studio marked the first time the two superstars had been in the same room without a crowd, cameras, or competitive tension between them. What happened in that studio over the next 6 hours would remain largely private, but those close to both artists described it as a revelation. They talked about their childhoods, Alan Leeds later recalled, about the pressure of being child performers, about what it felt like to have the whole world watching every move they made. They talked about their music, not as competition, but as art they were genuinely passionate about. They discovered they had more in common than either had realized. The conversation revealed surprising parallels in their experiences. Both had grown up performing under intense scrutiny. Both had complicated relationships with their fathers who had pushed them toward success. Both struggled with the isolation that came with unprecedented fame. They found they shared similar musical influences: James Brown's revolutionary stage presence, Sly Stone's fearless creativity, Stevie Wonder's spiritual depth. They even discovered they had been working on songs with similar themes, exploring questions of identity, spirituality, and social responsibility. During their conversation, Prince played Michael some unreleased tracks from his vault, including a haunting ballad about artistic freedom that he'd written months earlier. Michael shared lyrics he'd been developing for a song about breaking down barriers and finding common ground with former enemies. They realized that their rivalry had prevented them from recognizing how much their artistic visions actually aligned. Most surprisingly, they discovered that each had privately admired the other's work for years. Michael admitted he'd studied Prince's guitar technique and stage choreography, while Prince confessed he'd analyzed Michael's vocal arrangements and production choices. Their public animosity had masked a deep professional respect that neither had been willing to acknowledge. By the end of that meeting, Frank DeLeo later observed, they weren't rivals anymore. They were allies with a shared mission and a mutual respect that had been buried under years of media-manufactured competition. The plan they developed was ambitious beyond anything either had attempted before. A massive concert at Madison Square Garden, broadcast live on television, featuring not just Michael and Prince, but every major artist willing to stand up for musical freedom. They would call it the Music is Freedom concert, and it would send an unmistakable message to Washington. Artists and their fans would not be silenced. But organizing such an event in just 2 weeks seemed impossible. Major concerts typically required months of planning, complex logistics, and careful coordination between hundreds of people. Michael and Prince had 2 weeks, no confirmed venue, and the challenge of convincing other artists to risk their careers by participating in what many saw as a political protest that could result in government retaliation. The breakthrough came when word of their collaboration leaked to the press. The media reaction was explosive and immediate. "Music's biggest enemies unite," screamed the headlines across every major newspaper and magazine. "Michael and Prince, together at last?" The public response was overwhelming and enthusiastic. Madison Square Garden received over 50,000 ticket requests in the first hour after the concert was announced, even though tickets weren't officially on sale yet. More importantly for the success of the event, Artists began volunteering to participate without being asked. Madonna called personally within hours of the announcement. "I'm in," she told Michael during a brief phone conversation. "This is about more than music. This is about freedom, and I'll do whatever you need me to do." Bon Jovi, Run DMC, Stevie Wonder, Bruce Springsteen, and dozens of other major artists quickly signed on. What had started as a desperate plan by two former rivals had become a movement that was growing beyond their control in the best possible way. Record executives who had initially been nervous about artists taking political stands were now competing to have their performers included in the lineup. Television networks were bidding for broadcast rights. Corporate sponsors were offering support despite the political risks. November 7th, 1987. Madison Square Garden had never hosted anything quite like the Music is Freedom concert. 20,000 fans packed the arena, while an estimated 75 million people watched the live television broadcast across multiple networks in over 40 countries. The atmosphere was electric, but also tense. Everyone understood that this wasn't just entertainment. This was a stand for the future of artistic expression in America and around the world. Michael opened the show with a powerful performance of Bad, but he had subtly changed some of the lyrics to emphasize themes of resistance and refusing to be silenced. When he reached the line, "Your butt is mine," he pointed directly at a camera, sending an unmistakable message to the politicians trying to censor his music. The crowd erupted, understanding immediately that they were witnessing something historic, something that would be remembered long after the immediate political crisis had passed. Prince followed with Sign of the Times, a song that had been specifically targeted by the censorship legislation for its references to social problems, drug use, and political corruption. His performance was defiant, passionate, and unapologetic. Every note seemed to challenge the idea that artists should be restricted in what they could say or sing about. When he finished, he stepped to the microphone and spoke directly to the television audience with characteristic intensity. "They want to silence us because they're afraid of the truth music tells. But music has always been the voice of the people, and the people will not be silenced." The evening continued with powerful performances from every participating artist, each one specifically choosing songs that had been targeted by the proposed legislation or that dealt with themes of freedom, resistance, and artistic expression. Madonna performed Papa Don't Preach, Bruce Springsteen sang Born in the USA, and Run DMC delivered Fight the Power with an intensity that made the political message impossible to ignore. But the moment everyone was waiting for came near the end of the show, when Michael and Prince took the stage together for the first time in their careers. The arena fell completely silent as the two superstars faced each other at center stage, the weight of their history and the significance of this moment hanging in the air between them. What happened next was pure magic that no amount of rehearsal could have created. Without planning, without extensive preparation, the two superstars began improvising a medley that combined Purple Rain with Man in the Mirror. Prince played guitar while Michael sang lead vocals, their voices blending in harmony that seemed impossible given their history of rivalry. The combination of Prince's musical genius and Michael's vocal power created something entirely new, something that was greater than either could have achieved alone. As the song reached its climax, Michael spoke into his microphone with a passion that came from deep personal conviction. "Music isn't just entertainment. Music is healing. Music is truth. Music is freedom, and we will never let anyone take that freedom away from us or from future generations." Prince nodded in agreement, adding with his characteristic directness, "To every artist watching tonight, to every fan who believes in the power of music, we stand together. We fight together, and together we are unstoppable." The impact was immediate and overwhelming. Phone lines to Congress were flooded with calls opposing the censorship legislation, with some senators' offices reporting that they received more calls about the Music is Freedom concert than about any issue in their careers. Protest rallies sprouted up in major cities across the country, with fans and artists organizing demonstrations outside government buildings. Record sales of the band's songs skyrocketed as fans rushed to buy music they feared might soon be unavailable. But most importantly, the unity between Michael Jackson and Prince inspired other artists to speak out. creating a movement that extended far beyond that single night and influenced how artists would respond to censorship attempts for decades to come. Within a week of the concert, three senators withdrew their support for the Cultural Decency Act, citing overwhelming public opposition and serious concerns about constitutional rights. Within a month, the legislation was quietly shelved in committee, never to be seriously considered again. The message was clear. The American people would not accept government censorship of their music, especially when their biggest stars were willing to risk everything to oppose it. The friendship between Michael Jackson and Prince continued long after the cameras stopped rolling and the political crisis had passed. They began calling each other regularly, sharing ideas about music and life that went far beyond their professional relationship. They collaborated on songs that were never released publicly, keeping their musical partnership private and personal. Most importantly, they developed a mutual respect that replaced their former rivalry completely. That night changed both of them, Quincy Jones later observed. They realized they were stronger together than apart, and that their music meant more when they used it to defend something important than when they used it to compete against each other. If this incredible story of artistic courage and unlikely alliance moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of putting principles before personal rivalry. Have you ever had to put aside differences with someone to fight for something more important? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the moments when music changed the world.